system using elliptic curve, and what is the motivation behind this to use the elliptic curve. So what is the benefit, advantages we can get from the elliptic curve? This is the motivation of today's lecture. So today we'll discuss the following things. First we'll discuss about the elliptic curve and its various properties and its implementation part, and then we'll discuss one of my protocol that we designed using elliptic curve, that is the multi-server authentication. And lastly, I will discuss the limitations of the proposed scheme and the future scope of the proposed schemes and what is the current or recent trends in this domain. So from the yesterday's discussion, you can easily understand one topic in mathematics that is called the group theory. So here we take f of p is a set of integers modulo p. So we can define this f of p, or simply if I denote zp, so it like if p is a prime number, if p is prime, so you take an integer x, divide by p and take its remainder. So its element of this set will be p minus 1. Now for the multiplicative group zp star, which has the multiplicative inverse. You know, for the multiplicative group, identity element is 1, right? So what we want a into b is congruent to 1 mod p. Then we can say b is the inverse of a mod p, right? So then in this case it will be 0 has no inverse, so as p is a prime number, so all the elements less than p will be invertible, right? So this is the mathematics behind this. Okay, if I take a small set, suppose my p is 5, it is a prime number, so z5 we can define 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and z5 star we denote that is 1, 2, 3, 4. Why we are taking this is not true for every integer. If p is a prime, then only 1 to p minus 1. If it is composite number, the set will change. So here see why. Suppose, so what is the inverse of 3, right? Suppose I am writing inverse of 3 is x, that is congruent to 1 mod 5. So from here, if you solve this linear congruence equation, so here you see the value of x. So here you see what we can write. If we write x a 3 into 1 mod 5, it is 1. No, it is not congruent to 1. So 3 into 2 mod 5, it is congruent to here. Yes, it is congruent to 1. So the inverse of 3 is 2. Similarly, the inverse of 2 is 3. So what about the inverse of 4? It is self-invertible because 4 star 4 mod 5, this is congruent to 1. So that is why, and 1 is also self-invertible. So that is why all the elements has the multiplicative inverse. So this is the way we can compute this multiplicative group. Right? So here f of p means here z of p. So by notation, we take a p is a prime number. We define this. This is a set of integer modulo p. So we defined a group f of p with the addition modulo p. So here this addition is not a simple addition. So it is a plus b mod p. So this is addition. So this forms a group. That means it will satisfy the property of the group. The property of the group is the following. I will discuss later. Closure, associative, identity, and inverse. Okay, so for example, if I take set of integer z, you know the set of integers, suppose minus 2, minus 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, like that. So in this set, so what is the closure property? Closure property says that for any two integers, or for all integers a and b, that is in this set z, so if we take the operation as addition, so a plus b, if a plus b is always member of this set, and for every integer it is true, then we say this set satisfies the closure property. So associative property says that for any three element, so for three elements Z, it will satisfy the closure property A plus. If you first perform the addition with B and C and then A, it will be equal to A plus B plus C, right? So this is the associative property. Yes, this is true for all the integers. The identity property. So there exists an element E. So E plus here operation is addition. So E plus any element A plus C equal to A. So of course from this discussion here you see you can understand only 0 will provide this relation. So 0 plus A is equal to A plus 0 is equal to A. So here 0 serve as a additive identity. Additive. Why the term additive identity? Because the operation is addition. If it is multiplication, the identity element will change. We have to identify which one becomes the identity element. Inverse. Inverse means if I say A prime is the inverse of A, then A plus A equal to A plus A prime is equal to E. E is the identity element. In this case, that is 0. So obviously A prime nothing but minus of A, because minus of A plus A is equal to A plus minus of A will be to 0 element. So these are the four properties satisfied by this set. So this set is called the group. Similarly, one property, if A plus B is equal to B plus A, satisfy this is called abelian property or commutative property. Commutative property. So here you see for addition A plus B, B plus A is fine. But if you talk about the subtraction, this is not equal to B minus A. So this will not satisfy the commutative property. Similarly, if you go for the matrix multiplication, that will not satisfy the commutative property. So it is not like that every set will satisfy all the properties. No, we have to identify, that means we have to investigate. So which are the sets will satisfy the property. If a set with some operation satisfies these four properties, we say that set is a group. The same way we can define a multiplicative group. I think the participant can understand what do mean by group. So f of p, so that means this set of elements together with modulo p, addition modulo p operation, it satisfies all the four properties. So here f of p star, it will include only the invertible elements together with the multiplication modulo p. So what is this operation? So this is nothing but like multiplication means A into B mod P. This is not a simple multiplication, right? So that means, so in this case, f of P star with this multiplication modulo P, it also forms a group. So if they are from a group and if you go for in deeper, so there is a concept that is called field. So before that, field, ring, division ring, skew field, all these things are defined. So mathematically field is defined with two operations, addition and multiplication. So here, so it will form all the properties. So that means to become this field is a field, so this will satisfy certain properties. So in this case, f of p addition, this is commutative group. So f of P star, this also forms a commutative group together with two property that is called the distributive property. So for any three elements, A into B plus C will be equal to AB plus S. Similarly, the other property B plus C into A, this becomes B into A plus C into A. So all the here five properties plus these two property, all the property will be satisfied by this algebraic structure that is called field. So we mean this is by field. So in this case here you see, if you check this is a commutative group, its identity, multiplicative identity element will be 1, and for here the additive identity element will be 0. So that means the field has two identity elements. So from here you can easily understand the field has at least two elements. So number of elements is at least 2 because it has two operations, so it has at least two identity elements. So finite field means it has a finite number of elements, like this set. If P is finite, then like suppose P is 100, so total number of elements is 100. It is a finite set. So finite set. So over this field, we will define now the elliptic curve. So here you see, I am taking the simplest form that is widely used in crypto operation. So elliptic curve is y square mod P is congruent to x cube plus ax plus b mod P. So this is an equation of the elliptic curve. So here a comma b are a member of this Fp. So that is why we defined elliptic curve E over the scalar field Fp. Because why this scalar? Because for different values of a and b, we can define different elliptic curve or class of elliptic curve we can define. So this is the set of points, those will satisfy this equation. So it means E of Fp will provide you a point x comma y, because if you choose the value of x, you will get a value of y, right? So this is a set of coordinates x comma y, right? Which xy will satisfy this equation. So this is the elliptic set of elliptic curve points, right? And here operation is addition. So that is why we'll try to form this set is a group with respect to the operation addition. But this operation, this addition is not a simple integer addition. This is not. So we'll see. So what kind of operation it is? We define this is a addition, but with respect to elliptic curve, we'll understand what kind of operation it is. We'll define it later. Any question from the audience up to now? Any question? My screen is visible. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. Things are clear to all? Okay. So here you see this is a quadratic equation. The left hand side is a cubic and here is a quadratic. So ultimate, what does it mean? That means this cubic equation you will get the 3 root. You know this is quadratic cubic equation. If you solve it, you will get the 3 roots. Then these 3 roots you will take the square root of this, right? So this is called the discriminant of this equation. Because we are dealing with only the non-singular elliptic curve. So if this discriminant is 0, so delta is 0, we call it singular curve. If delta is not equal to 0, it's called non-singular. So delta is 0 means it has a 3 roots, suppose x1, x2, suppose x3, all are different, no repeating roots. So in this case, we have the repeating roots, right? So, so we are interested in this curve because it has efficiency and it has security benefits to use in the elliptic curve by using the cryptography, right? So that is why we are dealing with the non-singular elliptic curve. So that means if we solve it, so we'll get a set of pair x comma y. So those are belongs to the f of p. So field of prime number, right? So it satisfies the equation. So here together we defined a special point that we denoted as infinity, and this is called point at infinity. I'll tell you the geometrical as well as algebraic significance of this point. This is not actually a point on this curve, but this will this is included to form the set of points with this to become a additive group. Without this, the set of points cannot be a group. So this has a significant that means a significant role to make the set of points as a group, additive group. So for example, to make you understand, So suppose I have taken this P is 7, right? My small prime number, and I have defined a group elliptic curve, so where A equal to 2 and B equal to 4. If we solve this point, we will get this set of points only. So for example, so here you see f of, so first if I take f of P is my 7, so of course f of 7. So the element of this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So I defined my elliptic curve is x cube plus 4x plus 2. So here you see A is 4 and B is 2, right? So all x is also the element from this. That means x is ranges from 0 to 6. So if I take x equal to 0, so what it becomes? It becomes 2. So y is square root of 2. So here we are interested in integer part. So that is why x0 is not taken. But if I take x equal to 1, so what about y? 1 plus 4 plus 2. So this is 7. So this is not a perfect square. We are not taking. Similarly, if we take x equal to, so the point where it is taken x equal to x equal to 0, then if I, oh sorry, this curve I have taken. Oh, sorry. So this is y square. I have taken this curve x cube plus twice x plus 4. Yes, that is if x equal to 0, then y is equal to y square is equal to 4. So y is equal to plus minus 2. So here you see this is plus minus 2 mod 7. So that is why if it is positive number 2, and I think if people are familiar with the mod operation, so mod 7 minus 2 mod 7, it is congruent to 5. So that is why the 0.5. So that is why 0, 2 and 0, 5. So here you see 0, 2 and 0, 5 are the 2 points. If I take x equal to 1, so it becomes x equal to 1, 3, 7. So x equal to 1, this 0, 1, 1, 1, 1. Like, so this is the way you can solve this equation, and then you can get the set of elliptic curve points, right? So this is the set of elliptic curve points, and this point we will define later, right? So now we have a question. So why we are choosing the elliptic curve? Because we have several crypto systems based upon the number theoretic application. So why we need the elliptic curve? So what is the benefit from the elliptic curve? So here, so these are the 3 criteria based upon which we are using the elliptic curve in cryptography. The first is the functionality criteria, because if we talked about the elliptic curve cryptography, so various tools like encryption, decryption technique, digital signature, some other kind of elliptic curve tools. So the question is, can we design this kind of encryption, decryption technique, digital signature, other crypto tools using elliptic curve? The answer is yes. We have many applications of elliptic curve in cryptography, and already you are familiar with the encryption decryption technique in yesterday's discussion, the Bonnet-Franklin IBSK. Yes, or two-party authenticated key agreement protocol. Yes, we designed using elliptic curve. So functionality it provides. What about the security? So what assurances are available that the protocols are secure? Is if I designed elliptic curve based crypto tools, is it secure? Yes, the answer is yes, right? So we have designed various crypto protocols and we have analyzed their security. So what about the performance? So what about the efficiency? Efficiency not only from the computation point of view, its storage point of view, its implementation, like whenever you are going to implement in hardware. So what should be the chip size? Right. So from the literature, we can easily understand there are widely application of elliptic curve, and it is efficient and it provides the adequate level of security. Yes, we can use the elliptic curve in cryptography. So one important point you can easily understand why we prefer elliptic curve. So you know the RSA crypto system, right? Yesterday we discussed. So the literature it proves that the elliptic curve provides the equivalent level of security that the RSA provides with fewer bits. For an example, in RSA, the key length is at least 1024 bits. But in elliptic curve, the same level of security you can get with the key size 160 bits. You can imagine how we are reducing the size of the key. So whenever we are reducing the size of the key to 160 bits, right? So of course, the communication cost using elliptic curve will be reduced. If we implement the elliptic curve based protocol in chip level, yes, that also reduces the size of the chip. And also the main operation in the RSA operation is like M to the power E, like C to the power D. This is plain text and this is the ciphertext. So exponentiation operation. And this operation is most time consuming operation for other crypto operation. So in contrast to that, if in elliptic curve, we operation use the elliptic curve point addition and scalar multiplication, is much faster than the exponentiation operation. So from the implementation point of view, computation point of view, storage point of view, all the three issues is, but that means that this elliptic curve will provide the much better than the other classical crypto system. So that is why we used elliptic curve in cryptography. So now we'll try to discuss about the basics of the elliptic curve. So this is the group. So how to define the elliptic curve points? So let us, so suppose this is an example of the elliptic curve. So my drawing is not good. Please try to understand it, right? So if P is a point XY, simply a point which is just reflection of the point with respect to x-axis. This is x-axis. This is y-axis, right? So this is called negative of P. If this is P, it is P. So it defined this is x, comma minus 1. And this is called the negative of point, right? So the point at infinity, its negative point is same as it is, because this is served as an identity element. That is why. Because in if you looked into the set of integer, its identity element is 0, so minus of 0 is equal to 0. So here this is served as an additive identity. So minus infinity is equal to infinity. So point addition. So point addition says that any 2 points, suppose this is P and this is Q. So these 2 points, if we, okay, let me draw it better. So suppose this is another elliptic curve. So this is a point P, this is a point Q. So if we, okay, better to write, this is a point Q, this is P, this is Q. If we add these 2 points, it will cut the curve this. So that is minus R and its reflection is R. So this P plus Q will get this point R, right? So this is the geometrical significance. If we join these 2 points, it will cut the curve at third point, take it image with respect to x-axis, and that is your R. So in this case, we assume P not equal to Q for 2 different points. If P is equal to Q and P not equal to minus P, right? It is not its negative, so that is only true for the point at infinity. So that means you are adding to same point. So that means the tangent at this point, it will cut the curve at this point, and reflection of it R. So in this case, P plus P, that we denoted as 2P, that is R. So this is called point addition and this is called point doubling. Right? So we'll try to understand so how this addition is taking, that means we are defining this addition in elliptic curve. As I said earlier, this is not a simple point addition. This is this is not a simple integer addition. This is called the elliptic curve point addition or point doubling operation. So here, suppose 2 points x1, y1 and another point x2, y2, if they are not same, so addition of p plus q, that is r, if we denote x3, y3, so value of x3 will be this and value of y3 will be this. So how this point came, I will just discuss. Similarly, if we define the point doubling operation, we have a point P. If we perform P plus P, where P, of course, I'll tell you why we are taking this condition, right? So then P plus P is 2P. If we denote x3, y3, then its value will be x3 will be this value and y3 will be this, right? We'll try to understand. So how we define this addition operation, right? So with respect to the elliptic set of elliptic curve points, we define E of f of p. The closure property is satisfied because if we take any 2 points of the elliptic curve, then its addition will be another third point in the elliptic curve. So it satisfies the closure property. Similarly, it also satisfies the associative property. If you take any 3 elliptic curve points, P, Q, R, if you see the associative property is satisfied. So here, as I said, this point at infinity is defined for the purpose of identity element. So it serves as an identity element. So A plus E is equal to E plus A is equal to A. So like that. So for any points on elliptic curve, point at infinity, if you add, so it will give the same point again. So that is why it is a point as an identity element. So inverse of a point. So here if P is a point, it inverse means it's negative of P, because P plus minus of P, it will give the point at infinity. Right. So these are the 4 properties, and of course for elliptic curve points, P plus Q is equal to Q plus P. It satisfies the commutative property. So that is why the set of elliptic curve points forms a abelian group or commutative group, and where in point at infinity serves as a identity element. Now here is the geometrical significance. Please try to understand this diagram. So this is the elliptic curve. So we take 2 points P and Q, we add them, it curves the curve this. This is minus R, and its reflection, this is actually R. So adding these 2 points, we are getting this point. Similarly, point W. At this point, we are drawing the tangent. It will curve the curve at this point, takes its reflection with respect to x-axis, will get R. So P plus P is this R. So these 2 are the main operation that is performed in the elliptic curve. So now we'll try to derive the formula about the P plus Q. Now here what we understand. So participants, any difficulty to understand this, or should I continue? Any question? Okay, suppose this is an elliptic curve. I took a point P and a point Q. P, this is x1, y1. This is x2, y2. If I okay, take this. If I draw this, it will cut the curve that is minus R. I denote the minus R is x3 and y3 prime, because its reflection with respect to x-axis will be x3 y3. So here, of course, the relation of y3 prime, that is minus of y3 prime, will be y3. So first we'll try to define this point, and from here if we get y3 prime, then of course we can easily calculate y3 equal to minus of it. So now the PQ, this the chord P and Q, so we denote its equation is y equal to mx plus c, right? So this chord will pass from the point P and Q, and it will cut the curve at x3, y3. So here you see the point, the x coordinate x1, y2 and x3. So it means it will cut this curve, right, at minus R point. So the elliptic curve equation y square is equal to x cube plus ax plus b. So that means it will satisfy this elliptic curve, because this line will cut the curve at some point. So it will also satisfy this curve. So what we can write, x cube plus ax plus b is equal to, we place the value of y, that is mx plus c. So just we take in the left hand side, we make it minus, right? So from here, what we can understand, this is a cubic equation. It has three roots, x1, x2, x3. So this is x1, this is x2, right? We have to find out what is this x3. So now if we expand it, so I think all of you are familiar with the theory of equation. Suppose this is my equation. X cube plus c1 x square plus c2 x plus c3 equal to 0. If it has three roots, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3. So what we can write, sum of roots, alpha 1 plus alpha 2 plus alpha 3, that will be minus c1. Product, sum of product of two roots, alpha 1, alpha 2 plus alpha 2, alpha 3 plus alpha 3, alpha 1, that is c2. Product of three roots, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3, that is minus c3. So this is the relation. So with this relation, we can also define what is the value of x1, x2, x3 here. So here you see, the x square term, that is minus m square. This will be equal to sum of the roots, minus x1 plus x2 plus x3. Right? So from here you can find that x1 plus x2 plus x3 is m square. Then what is x3? Because 2 points P and Q are given. So we know what is x1, x2. But we have to understand what is x3. x3 will be m square minus x1 minus x2. So that we did here. Please try to understand. So we take the chord PQ is a line y equal to mx plus c, because it cuts the curve, so it will satisfy the curve. We did it. And it has a 3 cubic equation, right? We form it this way. We use the concept of the root. So we are getting only, we are taking this, right? So here m square. So from here we can deduce what is x3. So we know what is x3, m square minus x1 minus x2. Now here you see, from this diagram, here you see we have taken, because this chord passes through minus r, so it will also satisfy this point x3 y3 prime. So this line will also satisfy this point, right? This point and this point. So from here what we can write? Y3 prime is equal to m x3 plus c. That we can write. Yes, we write it. We use this. So by relation here, you see from here easily, you can easily understand what is the value of y3, this point, right? What is the value of this point? That means y3 is equal to minus of y3 prime. So now you have to understand how to define the slope. So from the school algebra, you can easily understand the chord. That means a line which is passes through 2 points P and Q, and if it is x1, y1, and this is x2, y2, so its slope m is defined y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. So if both the points are different, if both the points are same, what we did? So if both the points are same, that is we are trying to find out the tangent of this curve, x cube plus ax plus b. We are trying to find out the tangent at the point, any point. If both the points are same, so here p equal to q equal to same, so we are taking only x1 y point. You take the derivative, 2y dy dx is equal to 3x square plus a, right? So from here what you can write, dy dx, the slope at the point x equal to x1, y equal to y1, so it should be 3x1 square plus a by 2 times y1. So this is the value of m if both the points are same. If both the points are different, this is the value of m that we did here, right? So the value of slope y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1, and this is if the points p equal to q, right? So accordingly, you put this value to the formula of x3, because in x3 is equal to m square minus x1 minus x2. We are just writing the value of m here. So we are getting the value of x3 is equal to this. Things are clear to all? Okay. So now what we have to find? We have to find the y3 point. So because here you see this line passes through the point P, also you can satisfy it. So we writing y1 equal to m x1 this. We know what is y1, what is x1, so we can compute the constant c y1 minus mx1. Yes. Now what is the value of y3 prime? mx3 plus c, you write the value of c here. So you are getting y3 prime equal to this. If you know y3 prime, so what is the value of y3 then? If you know y3 prime, so y3 will be minus of y3 prime. So I write here the value of y3 prime, that is y1 minus m into x3 minus x1. So I think y1 is okay. This is also negative. So what we can write? This is a x1 minus x3 minus y. So this is the y3, and you are getting what is x3 from the this, right? So this is the way you can calculate all the x3 or y3 points. So finally, this is the y3 points, and negative of y3 will give you this point. So how we are just calculating the value of x3 and y3, now you can easily understand. So how we are actually defining the point addition and the point doubling operation. So this is a geometrical interpretation as well as the mathematics behind the elliptic curve point addition and the point doubling operation. Now we have a question. So how to calculate all the elliptic curves for a given curve? So simple algorithm. As a computer scientist, you need algorithm. So here we are giving. So if you remember this equation for f of 7, we are defining a elliptic curve y square equal to x cube plus 2 times x plus 4. So the x will ranges from 0 to p minus 1. So we'll start from x equal to 0. Then we'll increment x equal to x plus 1. And we'll check whether this left hand side is a perfect square or not. Suppose this is w square. So value of y will be this is square root of w square, that is plus minus w. So one is w and another is p minus w. This will give you 2 positive points. This is a simple algorithm. So we take x equal to 0 and then we are move up to p minus 1. So x less than p. If it is, we are checking the left hand side. It is a perfect square. If left hand side is a perfect square, if yes, so we are getting the point x comma value of y square root of w and minus square root of w. The minus square root of w means p minus square root of w. So we'll output these 2 points. And if not, then we'll go for the next point. So like that, we'll generate all the elliptic curve points. So this is very simple algorithm. So here I have just taken an example for this particular curve, right? So sorry, this sign should not be there. It is here we have taken p equal to 29, a prime number, a equal to 4 and b equal to 20, and from this elliptic curve we design all these points. Now we have a question. So why this point of what is this point of infinity? So we can define the point of infinity is like that. For a elliptic curve, suppose this is an elliptic curve. So point at infinity means suppose this is p and its minus p will be minus p. If we these 2 points, so we assume that this chord joining p minus p, this chord will cut the curve at infinite distance. So that is why we denote this is point at infinity. So this is the geometrical significance. So that means if we perform p plus minus p, so it will give you the point at infinity. Okay. Similarly, based upon the formula that we have derived, we perform p plus q, we get this point. So how we are getting, you can use the formula. And this is the point doubling, 2 times a point p, that we are getting the value r. Right? So you can follow the formula and you can easily understand so how we are getting this point. So now we will define the order of a point. Please try to understand the mathematics behind this. So if we suppose if we take a set, suppose Z5, so its element is, so order of this group, the number of element, that is 5. But what is the order of a particular element? Suppose A is an element from this set. Suppose what is the order of 2? What is the order of 4? So that is called the order of an element of a group. So in this case here you see this is the additive group. So order of 2 is equal to a least positive integer n, where if we add this element 2 plus 2 plus 2 n times, it will give you, of course here the modulo operation is mod 5 and it will give you the integer 0, where n is a least positive integer. Right. So this way you can define the order of element for the additive group. Okay. Now if I take the multiplicative group Z5 star. So here the element is 1, 2, 3, 4. So here the order of element, suppose 4 is equal to suppose n, where n is the least positive integer. What you did, if you multiply 4 into 4 into 4 n times, it will be congruent to one identity element, multiplicative identity element, and here operation is mod 5, that is. So what is this least positive integer? That we denoted as a order of element. Okay, let us discuss it is from the elliptic curve point of view. If P is a point of elliptic curve set, a smallest integer n, it is called the order of this point if n times P is point at infinity, because in this case this is a identity element. Right. And also the order of the curve is the number of points in this curve, that we denoted the hash of this, right, in the elliptic curve. So here one important theorem, that is called the Hess's theorem. So order of the elliptic curve points is P plus 1 minus T, where this T is bounded by this operation. And this is called the trace of this curve. And with respect to this relation, this interval is called the Hess's interval. So that means the number of elliptic curve points lies within this interval. And here you see P is very large number. So with respect to P, this number is small. So that is why the number of elliptic curve points is approximately equal to P. So suppose P is 97. And with respect to 97, if you define the elliptic curve, approximately you will get the 97 points. Not exact, but approximately. So that is why here you see if P is a large number, say suppose the value of P is 10 to the power 20 or more, then the number of elliptic curve points will be huge. And the calculation of the elliptic curve points, the way that we have given the algorithm, is really difficult job, because it involves lots of computation. So that is why the generating of all the elliptic curve points is not a simple task. You need some more efficient algorithm to compute the elliptic curve points. But unfortunately, we don't have. So this is the only way we can generate the elliptic curve. So that is why to generate the elliptic curve for the large group is quite difficult. I'm talking about from the computation point of view. It takes much time. So that is why in cryptography we are not considering the entire elliptic curve. We are considering a set of elliptic curve points that is a subset of this. So it means, so if you remember the concept of generator in yesterday's discussion, so here I have taken P is a generator point. That means with the help of P, we can write 0P, 1P, 2P. This is the way. Suppose order of the group is n, so n element, so they will form a group G, right, where P is a generator, or you can write this. So this is a subset of P of A, because this is a very large group. Computation of all this point is very difficult. So we take a subset of this and accordingly we define the elliptic curve group, and based upon this group we are defining the crypto system. Like Bonnen, Franklin, IB scheme, we design based upon this group. This is a subset of elliptic curve points, not the elliptic curve group, entire elliptic curve group. So this is called the point multiplication operation. So k is a scalar like 5, 10, 7, whatever into a elliptic curve point. So this kind of operation you never encountered. So this is not a simple this. So what you can do here, you see from the concept of the repeated addition, we can perform it. So k times p means we are adding p plus p plus p k times. Suppose 2p. What we are doing? P plus p 2 times. 3p. What we are doing? P plus p like that. So repeated addition we are performing to define this scalar point multiplication. Scalar point multiplication. Right? So this is called scalar point multiplication operation. And how we are doing? Just we are performing the repeated addition. But as a computer scientist, you may that means design some more efficient algorithm. So here, how many addition we have to perform? K minus 1 addition. So order of k. So if you have better algorithm, suppose you are doing it log of k times, yes, that is very efficient algorithm, right? This is also a good research area. So how to design an efficient algorithm to reduce the time complexity of scalar point multiplication operation. Okay. Now we'll try to give you two algorithms that can be performed by the scalar point multiplication. How we will perform efficiently. Two basic algorithms. Suppose I want to compute 16p, right? So as per the definition, what we have to do? P plus p up to 15 times. So how many times we have to perform the 15 addition? But we have better algorithm. So what we are doing? We are representing this k in binary form. So here 16 is binary form 1 1 1 no 1 0 0 na. I think this is 16 na. Participants, this is correct. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, you are audible.
So here you see, we will not perform the 15 addition operation. Instead of, we will reduce the operation. So here you see, suppose we are talking about the most significant bit. If this significant bit is 1, so what we'll do, we'll just perform the point doubling operation. So if this is p, so we'll perform p plus p point doubling operation. That means actually we are calculating 2p. So if the next bit is 0, so suppose this is q, we'll perform only addition. Q plus q, that means 4p. Next bit is 0, again we'll perform q is equal to q plus q, that means 4p plus 4p. So we are getting 8p. Next time, yes, this bit is also 0, we'll perform only the addition, not point doubling. So 8p plus 8p, so that is 16p, the answer. So how many addition we are performing? 1 addition. Here 2 addition, here 3 addition, and here 4 addition. So here instead of 15, we are performing only 4 additions. So it is faster. Similarly, you can also start from the least significant bit, right? So this way you can perform the scalar point multiplication to make this computation more faster. So this is called the left to right. We are considering from the we are just considering the most significant bit, right? So we represent this k in terms of bit k0 to kt minus 1. We are considering first this bit. So first we perform the doubling operation. Then the corresponding bit is 1. Then we'll perform the addition. If not, then simply we'll double it. So this is the way you can get the answer. Similarly, other way you can also consider from the least significant bit and you can do the same. But we'll first perform the addition operation, then we'll perform the point doubling operation. So both the time complexity of both the algorithm is same. Because how many times you are repeating this for loop? Only this t times, order of t. Right, the number of bits in k. But if you perform the naive approach, you have to perform the value of k. In this case, that is 16. So we have to perform 16 type addition. But in this case, we have to perform only 4 addition. Now, with respect to elliptical, we will define certain hard problem or computational problem. So yesterday we have discussed the discrete logarithm problem, computational Diffie-Hellman problem. So now, with respect to elliptical, please try to understand the same computational problem that we defined here. So in multiplicative group, what we define the discrete logarithm problem, g to the power x mod p. So we have to calculate what is x here. Now with respect to elliptic curve, so this G generator, in this case that is the elliptic curve point P generator. So suppose P and A times P. So this is your Q, right? So from Q I want to ask, so to extract A. That is also called the discrete logarithm problem in elliptic curve. So that is also hard. We do not have any deterministic polynomial time algorithm. The computational Diffie-Hellman problem, we have G. So in this case, elliptic curve point generator P, we have g to the power x, okay, A times P, we have g to the power y, suppose B times P. So from here, we are asking you to calculate A times B times P. That is called computational Diffie-Hellman problem in elliptic curve. So that is also a hard problem. Right? So these are there are many, right? So similarly, you can define the bilinear Diffie-Hellman assumption that we discussed in the yesterday's discussion. So you have a P, you have a AP, you have a BP, you have a CP, and what you have to calculate? You have a PPT algorithm. You have to calculate bilinear pairing, P comma P to the power ABC. So here this AP means this A times P, that is scalar point multiplication, and this P is elliptic curve point. Right? So that is called the bilinear Diffie-Hellman problem. This is also another hard problem. So these are the few examples of the hard problems defined for the elliptic curve. So based upon these hard problems, you can design a crypto system with respect to the elliptic curve. So we define here elliptic curve discrete logarithm problem and the computational Diffie-Hellman problem. So now, just as an application of elliptic curve, we will discuss one important protocol that is called the multi-server authentication. So all of you know the authentication process. So everywhere before accessing any system, you have to first prove your identity to the system. Suppose I want to make some transaction to the bank. So first I use my login identity and password. I authenticate myself to the bank. Bank will identify. At the same time, I will also identify, yes, that I am doing the transaction with the correct bank, not any other. Because you know these days there are many forgery happens. So fraudulent. That means if you get some link that is not the appropriate link and that ask you to supply your some credential, and if you blindly supply your credential, the forger or those who are going to theft your login credential, they will take that credential and they can misuse it. Right? So that is why the mutual authentication is an important thing. So before accessing any system, so you make sure that yes, you are accessing the correct system. Similarly, it is the responsibility of the system that you are also the correct party. So that is simple client-server authentication technique, but we concentrate on the topic multi-server authentication. The simple client-server authentication technique. So what is the working principle here? You see, so that suppose I am client and one system like server. So I want to authenticate myself to the server. So first I have to log in. I have to register with my login credential, suppose my identity and password, maybe other form like smart card, maybe smart, right? So many security. I'm getting noise. Could you please off your microphone? Okay. So single authentication like that. So in this case, the server will provide suppose one kind of application. Suppose this is your email server. So I am logging to Gmail server, then I am accessing my email. That's fine. But I want to get suppose another kind of server service, like I want to get suppose the financial transaction. So suppose this is one server with this is the Gmail server. This is suppose server with the bank, right? So I want to get I'm the same client. Sometimes I access my email. Sometimes I access this server to perform some financial transaction, right? So suppose the another server S3 that will help you to just issue some e-governance application. This is suppose one of the service provided by the e-governance service. So there are multiple servers. They are actually providing the different services. So if I follow the single authentication technique, so what is required here? So I have to register to each and every server multiple times. So for every server, due to security reasons, I have to remember multiple credentials. Suppose what the password I used to access this server, due to security reasons, I will not use the same. So I will use the different one. So if there are n servers, I have to use the n number of different credentials. So that is a bottleneck of this, right? So instead of that, the multi-server authentication gives a technique that the client and all the servers will register to a single entity that is called the registration center. So all of them are actually registered. So from the client point of view, client will only register to the RC. Now it is the responsibility of the RC and all the server, and they will manage there. And then this client will log into any of the server, right? So this is the benefit of the multi-server authentication. I can access multiple server just by registering to a single entity with single credential. So this is one of the application for the authentication. So what are the common entity for this kind of architecture? So here you see this is the user, and this is a registration center, a trusted entity, and a number of application servers. Right. So this is one good paper. So you can just read this paper. So I have taken the diagram from this paper. So this is also a good paper. So the entity is registration center, a number of application server, and a user. So let us first discuss the general approaches that is available for this multi-server authentication technique. So generally the password-based authentication we are quite familiar, and we are preferring password-based authentication. The reason is simple, because password can be easily memorized. So that is why. Because if you use the public key private key, here you see the size of the private key and public key is very large. To remember, that is quite impossible. So for that case, you have to use suppose other electronic vault or electronic wallet to store this value, and you have to carry these electronic devices, right? But if you use the password-based authentication technique, generally we use the password that is of shorter length, right, and that can easily memorized. So that is why we prefer the password-based authentication. So there are, as I said, there are various kind of authentication factors are involved. So single authentication, single factor authentication, just only the secret credential is your password. In two-factor authentication, true credential, your password as well as nowadays you are familiar with the smart card like your ATM card. And smart card-based authentication is also a two-factor authentication. Similarly, you can involve the three-factor authentication. You can increase one more authentication factor to just improve the level of security. You have password, you have smart card, and you have also some biometric features you can include in your system to provide more security, right? So there are, or even you can include more authentication factor that is called the multi-factor authentication system. So password-based authentication, but there are also other kind of authentication system based upon the public key cryptography. As I said, the public key and private key is involved, right? Accordingly, you can design your system. So in public key crypto system, already we have discussed the certificate authority based public key cryptography. That means in this case, user and application server, they can use the public key private key concept, right? Similarly, identity based cryptography like Boney and Franklin IBE, the same concept can be used to design any multi-server authentication system. And you know the benefit of using the identity based cryptography. Similarly, other crypto systems are like self-certified public key cryptography. I'll tell you something about this self-certified public key cryptography and certificate-less public key cryptography. So these are the general 4 paradigms in the public key cryptography. So this is certificate-based, this is certificate identity-based, does not need any certificate. Self-certified. So here user and the server both they will communicate and create their own certificate. In this case, other third party will not be involved. And certificate-less public key cryptography here also like IBC, certificate is not required. And we'll tell you why the certificate-less public key cryptography is important. Though we have another crypto system that is called the identity-based crypto system. So the some problem with the password-based authentication, right? Like risk of modifying the password table. Because whenever you are before accessing any server, you have to first register to the server. Now during login, you will send some of your credential over the net. Server will receive it and verify it. So it means server needs some kind of verification. Some credential will be stored in the server side. So suppose you are sharing your password with the server, server will store. During login, you submit your password. That password goes to server. Server will verify the stored value and the received value. So it's stored in some secret file password table. It can be modified accidentally by some hacker. That is a problem. It is the online offline password guessing attack. Because the problem is that to make the password easy, that means you can easily memorize the password, but why it is short in length? So that is why the people can take the other technology and try to guess what the password you are using. It can be online mode or can be offline mode. In offline mode means that means the adversary will just try to guess the one by one password, and then it will verify by his or her own, right? And similarly, online password, it will guess the password and accordingly using that password, it will create the login message and send to the server. So n number of login messages sent to the server. If any of the message is accepted, and the corresponding password will be the correct password. So this is the way the online guessing attack can be performed. Stolen verifier attack. As I said, your login some of your credential is stored in the server side, and that can be stolen and can be misused by the third party. Insider attack, because a person or maybe some organization is managing the authentication server, and if the person who is managing the server is not trusted, he or she can theft your credential and can misuse it. That is called the insider attack. And for the multi-server authentication, the basic architecture is that during authentication, the RC is also involved. So that means user will log into the RC, RC will communicate with the corresponding server. So this is a bottleneck because lots of competition involved due to the involvement of RC and also the communication cost. Because you are communicating as a user, you are communicating to RC and RC will communicate with the server. So there are two communications. So that is why it increases the communication cost as well as competition cost. So certificate authority based system, if you design multi-server authentication using certificate authority based. So here, of course, the inherent issue that is we need a certificate authority. We need a separate infrastructure that is PKI. Because PKI will take the responsibility to create the certificate, to manage the certificate, to delivery, revocation, everything, storage, everything. So you need the additional infrastructure. So this is not a part of your multi-server authentication protocol. This is additional infrastructure. If it is available, then only you can design CAPKC based authentication system, otherwise not. So this is a burden, extra burden. Because if the number of feature grows, so CA has to handle huge number of certificates. So lots of storage as well as computation is involved. So already you are familiar with the identity-based crypto system. So here we do not need any additional infrastructure like PKI. So the computation and the storage due to public key certificate is removed, right? So what is the advantage of this system, identity-based system? You can use your publicly available identity as a public key, like your email ID, MAC address, like your IP address, right? So all these things you can easily use as a public key. But what is the problem with this? We need a trusted authority, that is called the private key generator or key generation center. It must be trusted because the PKG computes your private key. That is a problem, and that is called the key escrow problem. Why? If PKG is not trusted, so it can misuse your private key. So we have a certain technology to overcome this. That is, we can use the concept of threshold cryptography. It means, because here you see the computation of private key involve the private key of the PKG. So instead of one PKG, what we can do in the threshold cryptography, multiple PKG are involved. It means that means you are actually breaking the secret key of a single PKG into a multiple PKG. So suppose the secret key of the PKG is breaks into 10 parts, and you are that means sharing this 10 parts to 10 different PKG. So now we are making a system that is based on the threshold key cryptography. So what you do, that means out of 10, if at least 8 PKG compromised, then only they can recover the private key of the actual private key, otherwise not. So here what we assume that the compromise of the 8 or more PKG is difficult, right? So this is why you can also overcome the key escrow problem, but this is also a genuine problem. So that is why the people will follow the self-certified public key cryptography or certificate-less public key cryptography. So the self-certified public key cryptography is designed by the Mark Gerald in 1991. This is quite an old system, but this is not popular as IBC or certificate-less. But this is also an alternative of the CAPKC and IBC also. So here no certificate is required like IBC. But what is the advantage of this? So here during registration, or what you can say the key extraction phase, both the user and the third party both will cooperate with each other, and they will do some kind of computation, and they will create their own certificate so that it can be verified by user as well as the third party. So it means with your private key, a certificate is embedded so that that certificate can be used to verify the public key. But what is the beauty of this? This certificate is not generated by third party, right? And for this, we do not need any storage or any extra computation. So certificate-less public key cryptography, if you looked into the CA-based system and the identity-based system, CAPKC. So here user will select a secret key and calculates its corresponding suppose the elliptic curve, so it will create a public key x times p. And IBC, so you have a identity hash of ID and your secret key suppose S, so that is S, the secret key of the PKG into Q. So here you see this key is known to PKG and user only knows the secret key. So now certificate-less public key cryptography, what it does, it will take this X and S times Q, this tuple as a private key. So what is the benefit of that? In this case, user creates this X and this creates PKG. So PKG will not know the complete key, but part of the key is known, right? And also here, as here you see, this key is not required any certificate to authenticate corresponding public key. So that is a overall public key, that is if we denote PK is this XP and this Q, so we do not need any certificate to explicitly authenticate it. We do not need any certificate. So that means the CLPKC combines the advantage of certificate authentication system and the IBC. So that is why it is better than both the crypto system, and this is a popular crypto system. So you can also use the certificate-less public key cryptography to design the multi-server authentication system. Okay. So the benefit, as I told, no certificate is required to authenticate the public key. Yes, key SQ problem is removed because the PKG that means PKG will not know the entire secret key, but one part is known. Okay. So this is the concept behind the certificate-less public key cryptography. And this is designed by the Aljami and the KG Peterson in 2003. So there are many crypto systems designed based upon this certificate-less public key cryptography. Not only multi-server authentication system, any encryption technique you can design. And in this paper, if you follow, they have designed one encryption technique as well as the digital signature scheme. So this is very good paper. So my suggestion is to read this paper. You can easily understand the crypto system and how it is actually used to design the public key cryptographic tool. Okay, now let us come to the actual topic. So up to now, if you have any doubt or any questions, please ask. Any question? Okay. So here you see, in this authentication system, first we have to design the common parameters so that the system can run. So here RC will take this responsibility to design all the parameters. So this is a crypto system designed based upon the elliptic curve. So RC choose a large prime number Q, and this is field of prime number, this is set of elliptic curve points, and this is the group, and this P is a generator of this group. So this is a set of elliptic curve points out of which this GQ is created a subset of points that is generated by this P. So RC creates his own public and private key based upon the elliptic curve, X a number, that is secret key, and this public key is X times P. So RC chooses a bilinear map. You are familiar with 3 hash function, this H0 and H2, these are the general cryptographic hash function, whereas H1, this is the map to point hash function that is actually designed for the identity based encryption. Already we discussed in the yesterday's discussion, right? So this is the special hash function called map to point hash function, and accordingly these are the public parameters. RC is chosen and it make it public so that user, all the server knows what are the parameters is used in this system. Whereas the secret key of the RC is secret, right? It is not known to the outsiders, only RC knows. So this is the setup phase. Now extract phase, as you know, as you familiar with the IBE. So in this extract phase, all the application server computes their own public to private, as well as user also create his or her own public to private. So let us first discuss about how the server application server will create the identity based private key. So SG will first directly meet or in person to the RC, and RC will select a random number. It will calculate y equal to small y times p. RC computes a hash value. This is a general hash value. Then it will calculate the identity based private key y plus this. Then it will deliver this securely to the SJ order that is over out of band channel, means any secured mechanism. So in this case, what you can do, you can use any secured channel like HTTPS. You can email these things using that means email service, or you can write, that means the RC can write this value to a smart card and securely deliver the smart card. The server read the smart card and can get the private key, public key. So any secured mechanism, that means channel, you can use to deliver this, any offline mechanism. So now we have a question. So how this secret key and what is the corresponding identity-based public key? So here you see DSJ. This is the identity-based private key computed like that, and its corresponding public key will be DSJ times P. Right. So how it is, because this YSJ plus hash of this value times public key of the RC, that will be nothing but DSJ into P. So from this derivation you can easily understand. The value of YSJ equal to YSJ times P plus hash of this means this is L times XP. So if you common this P outside, so this becomes this, and this is nothing but DSG. So that means this is the public key of the application server SJ, and this is DSJ is the private key of the SJ. So this DSJ is secret, it is only known to the server, but public key can be computed by anyone because YSJ is public. This identity is also public for every server, and this public key is also public because this is the public key of ours. So anyone can easily compute this value, that is nothing but the PSG. So this is the way each and every application server will get the identity-based public and private key. Now, how the user will get it? So here the user will get in two ways, because we are that providing flexible service, because you know sometimes as a user I want to do the anonymous communication. Anonymous authentication means I want to authenticate myself to the server, but during communication I do not want to disclose my identity, because my identity may help the third party to trace me. So one issue is that traceability. I do not want to give the clue to the third party to trace me, right? So that is why I want the anonymous communication. So in this case, we provide the flexibility to the users. If the user want to use the anonymous communication, one public key private key will use. Want to use normal communication, then another set of public key private key use. But both are based upon the identity-based crypto system. So here, so first we discuss a normal communication, how the public key private key is designed, like application server. Right, the same way we are doing. So here a validity period is involved, because this validity period will give you the currency of the public key private key, because for the user we are not giving the public and private key will be valid for entire period. For a lifetime, for certain period. That is why we are inserting the validity period. So in this case, the RC will deliver this identity-based private key, this public value as well as the validity period. So user can verify like that we have discussed. In scenario 2, in this case, we are designing the public key private key so that it can make the anonymous communication. So in this case, the identity is not revealed. Instead of, we are creating the pseudo identity. So here you see RC, which is true integer. Then it will calculate this Y value like before, but it creates a pseudo identity for the user UI. Then based upon this pseudo identity, here you see the actual identity is not involved. We have pseudo identity, and we are creating the private key and the corresponding public key. So here the RC delivers the identity-based private key, this public value, pseudo identity as well as the validity period. So next time the user wants to communicate, the user, if this situation that means user wants to perform the anonymous communication, this pseudo identity will be used. Otherwise, normal identity will be used for the normal authentication. So in extracting the application server and the user issue the computes their public and private key. Now the user can perform the mutual authentication with the any application server. Suppose UI wants to communicate with a particular application server SG. So how the authentication will take place? So this is the mutual authentication page. UI chooses a number, a current timestamp. This timestamp will help you to protect the replay attack. It creates a value and then it will create a hash of this. This is a map to point hash function. It creates a signature. This is a signature, and it sends this login message to the server. Now the role of the server is to validate this login message. If it is correct, it allows UI to access the server. Otherwise, no. So after receiving this, it will check the validity period. That means when this message is created at T UI time and when it is received, T prime, right? Their duration is within the allowable interval, then it is valid login message. It is not a replay message. So it checks the identity in the identity revocation list. As I said, the public and private key is valid for a certain period of time. After that period, the user has to revoke his identity and identity-based public key private key, right? So that is why. So this is the IDRL, means identity revocation list. So the server checks this verification equation, right? E of this. If it is correct, then the login message is correct. If not, it will simply terminate and abort that means it will terminate the session, right? So if the user is valid, so server will also create one replay message so that the user can verify yes, the server is also the correct party. So the same way, server also select one random number, it will select a timestamp, it will create the same way the user did, it will see a replay message and it will send to UI. So after sending this, a server computes its session key. This is a session key, right? So this is the value that is, this is the server, secret key of the server. This is the number selected by the server, and this is the public value. It is received in the login message RI UI, and this PUI is the public key of the user. So this is public and this is secret, right? So based upon this value, the secret key, session key is completed. Now, this is the value received from the user from the server side, and the server, the same way user will verify whether the server is correct or not. It will verify the timestamp, then it will verify this equation. When it is correct, then server is correct, otherwise server is not correct. Then the same like server user will compute a session key, the common session key, same session key. So here you see this is the number selected by the user, is private key, and this is the value received in the login message, replay message, and this is the public key of the server. So this is the common session key. So now the mutual authentication over this session key is completed. So here you see the beauty of this technique is that the session key is computed between user and server, that is same, common. So that is why both of them can use this session key to encrypt any of the confidential message and they can exchange. Well, this is the simple correctness. This is a verification equation. We use the bilinear pairing property. So here you see the value of BUI is equal to DUI times HUI, right? So as per the pairing property, DUI goes out here and then it is come back to here. So this is HUI and this is DUI into P, that is PUI. So this was the verification equation. And yes, it is correct. The same is true for the server. So that means our mutual authentication technique is correctly justified and the technique is correct. So now we have a question. So how they have computed the common session? So here you see user and server will compute like that. This is the user side. RUI DUI into this is the public value for the server. So here you see this indicates RSJ times P this. If you take P outside, so this becomes this, and these two are the integers. They satisfy the commutative property. So we can just, this is AB, so this is BA, right? So what is this value? Here you see RUPI, so it means DSG. So this is the value actually computed at the server side. So this is the user side, this is the server side. Both are same. That means their session key is same. So they perform the mutual authentication. They compute the same session. So to justify its security, we provide both the mutual authentication as well as the session key agreement. Both are secured based upon the elliptic curve computational diffusion assumption. So, here we have not discussed this proof here because it takes much time. If you have interest, then you can read my paper and you can easily understand the detailed analysis of this theory. So this scheme has also some limitations. based upon the recent research. So the limitation is the single point failure. Why single point failure? Because single RC will manage all these things. If RC is down or RC is compromised, yes, the entire system is compromised, right? So RC must be trusted. The requirement is because if RC is not trusted, so they can use the private key of the server as well as user. Yes, that is why RC has the ability to trace the action of the users. Not any other party can trace, but RC can trace. So that is why RC must be trusted. If RC is not trusted, the security may be compromised. Also, the problem of revoking the misbehaving or compromised users. You know, some of the user has the malicious intention, right? Try to impersonate other users, try to impersonate some of the servers. So if it is detected that some of the user is misbehaving or it is compromised, that means their publicly private key is compromised. So in this case, this is the responsibility of the RC to maintain this. So one of the technique that is called the black white list. So that means the RC will maintain a list. So suppose the user 1, yes, this is not compromised. User 2, it is suppose misbehaving user. So some kind of that means indication can be maintained by the RC, and the same can be shared with all the application server, because otherwise if the RC will maintain this and does not inform to other application server, the application server may allow some compromised or some misbehaving user to access that server, and after accessing the server, the user can misuse it. So that is why the misbehaving and compromised user, to maintain this kind of misbehaving or compromised user is a challenging task. So we need a backend channel. Why? Because to communicate with the RC with the application server. Because the application server that must be informed by the RC. So that is why we need some kind of backend channel. So these are the limitations, and now recent trends is to design the multi-server authentication using blockchain. So I think this is a buzzword, and all of you are quite familiar with this term blockchain, right? So blockchain-based authentication technique is the current trend. So you can think about how to design a secure and efficient multi-server authentication using blockchain. So the benefit of the blockchain is that it is a decentralized technology. Like P2P technology, it is not managed by a central agency, right? Entire network will control the that means blockchain. So it has certain that means properties like consistency. You know, blockchain is like a linked list, chain of nodes, right? So suppose you are considering 100 nodes 1 to 100. Suppose you want to change the 50th node, but you cannot change it because the property of the blockchain says that if you want to change the 50th node, so you have to change all the nodes from 1 to 50, and that takes huge computation, right? So due to that, the changing of some of the block in the blockchain is not possible. So that is also called the immutability property. You cannot change or alter any of the block. Consensus algorithm, because the linked list node creation in the blockchain is not that means it does not allow anyone to create the node or node in the blockchain. So there must be some common algorithm. So that is called the consensus algorithm. That means all the nodes in a blockchain network, they must agree on some common protocol. Whenever a node is created, the node is validated by the consensus algorithm. If it is validated, then that node can be added to the blockchain, otherwise not. It also provides the transparency. Why? Because everything put it into the blockchain, it can be accessed or it can be read by anyone. So that is why it maintains the transparency. So due to this, the blockchain is quite popular nowadays. So as I said, it is a chain of blocks. So what are the things included in the blocks? So here you see unique identifier, that is a block number. This is the header part, right? The hash of the previous block. You know the hash value. So you are the 50th, you are creating a 50th node, so it will contain the hash of the 49 block. 49 block also contains the hash of the 48 block, like that. the creation of the block timestamp, one random value is associated with this, because you know how the block is created, who will create this block, that is called the mining of the block. So mining of the block involves to solve some cryptographic hard problem. Like you have given a instance of discrete logarithm problem and ask you to solve this. If you solve this, then you will get the reward. So for this, some random number is involved. And this is the hash of this current block. And here you see in a block, so suppose for the financial transaction, you are making 100 transactions. So all the 100 transactions will be included in a single block. So single block is containing some kind of transaction. So how to just include them? So one concept that is called the Marklet tree is used to represent it. So here suppose there are a number of transactions. So suppose the first transaction hash of this is put here. Now hash of this, it will put a hash of this like that. So finally the root of this tree will contain the hash of all the transactions. So this value will be used to validate the entire all the transaction that is put in this block. So this is one of the that means overview of one of the that is of a node in a blockchain. So this is the way the blockchain can be created, and also the involvement of the consensus algorithm like proof of work, proof of stake, right, and other consensus algorithm, they are involved to create the blockchain. So this is quite popular nowadays. So you can try to use the blockchain to design the multi-server authentication. You can also use elliptic curve. You can also use certificate-less cryptography, identity-based cryptography, self-certificate cryptography, password-based technique, multi-factor authentication like using biometric. So many things available to you. So now you can design a secure multi-server authentication system. So this is all about my discussion, and here the certain references. So if you want to know about the elliptic curve, this is a very good book. This is only written for the elliptic curve, and few tutorials link I have given. So from the audience, please ask question if you have. Any questions from the audience?
Dear participants, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions. Good afternoon, sir. I think students or participants do not have any queries. So I think we can wind up the session. If you have do not have anything to share anything more.
Okay, okay, thank you. So should I have to share my PPT to you?
Yeah, you can share it to the Sachin sir's email ID.
Okay. Okay, okay,
Thank you,
thank you to all for this wonderful.
for the thank you, sir, for being providing the time and for this wonderful session. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, dear participants. This is the end of the session one of final day. Next session will be taken by Dr. Priya Mata, and it will be on digital forensics. So time we will start this session at 12 o'clock, 12 noon. For the meantime, you can have a break. Thank you.